Tonight, I'd just like to say that I don't speak for any political party, and I don't have any property or I don't own any property in Kwinana or in Fremantle. So, okay. I respect the work that's been done by the Fremantle Port Authority and the Department of Transport over many years, and that's what makes this Fremantle divestment so strange to me. So tonight we're having a change of tact. We're talking about the inner harbour. The inner harbour is the Victoria Quay and Rouse Head, and the outer harbour is in Kwinana. So for a long time I haven't been able to speak about Fremantle for a variety of reasons, but tonight I think this is so important, it compels me to talk about what the real options are and the decision that you have to make in a couple of weeks. So tonight I want to focus on basically 5 areas. We could talk about a lot of things, but really just the key points. Is there excess capacity in the inner harbour? What are we trying to achieve? And the planning and financing, how does it fit into this picture? Where is the real value in Fremantle Port? And the economic benefits of the outer harbour and the waterfront development? And finally, what's the solution? So is there excess capacity in the inner harbour? And you've seen the slide before from Peter, and it's really a nice overview to sort of show that Fremantle's really fallen behind the rest of the world in the last 20 years. And the message that is constantly hammered home by in the papers and so forth is we have excess capacity. And quite frankly, you can say you could have capacity of 2 million or 3 million or 5 million or whatever it is. You're going to say whatever you can to get the highest price for the sale of the asset. But as we are all open-minded, and we're probably wanting to give the government the benefit of the doubt, if we do have excess capacity, then why do we need to spend another 1.9 billion on a new road? And then a potential 1.3 billion to go under the river and reconfigure the transport logistics in the Rouse Head. Also, we only have a single grade rail line coming into the port, which is you can't do double stacking, conflicts with the passenger service, has a lot of issues with the rail. We can't accept future ships at the current ships. We have length and depth restrictions already. That comes from the Fremantle Port Authority website. So there's lots of issues around the excess capacity and whether they really have excess capacity. I'd argue that it's theoretical and not actual capacity. So we're also selling one of our best assets in WA for a knockdown price. And so what we're really trying to do is look at what the real economic and social benefits are for the Fremantle Port. So who really benefits when you stand back? Why are we even doing this? Who really wins from this sale? And you've got to say the logistics companies in North Fremantle are a major beneficiary because it basically stunts rail growth in the future. It forces everything onto the road freight, which is about double the price, roughly. Road freight's double rail and rail's double sea freight. So it's very good for the logistics companies. And in one foul swoop, you eliminate basically any competition for decades. And because of there's a very limited number of companies who play in this logistics space with their network of investors, they will really control, because of their market dominance, what will happen in the future. It's also a very good deal for Melbourne because it keeps Fremantle or Perth really as a third or fourth rate feeder port to Melbourne, and won't allow us to ever compete with the eastern states. Like one little point, and we can talk about later, is that if you have a big enough port, you could actually take things from here and ship them east on the rail and compete with rail freight in the eastern states as well as South Australia. It's also great for investors because investors in the future, because of their relationships with the logistics companies, will be able to dictate terms to the government. And the government would argue that, but in practice, that's what will happen because of market dominance and so forth, and I've seen that elsewhere. So all of this is really unsurprising when you think about it. Because in 2010, when we did the Fremantle dredging, there must have been commitments made to also to the government, but also the logistics companies, to justify the investment in Rouse Head and Fremantle. And not that this is wrong, because the authorities were forced into this position because of the lack of options, because we hadn't built out the outer harbour. But that's now coming back to haunt us. So it's really, what we're really doing is compounding problems from the past. So let's think about what we're trying to achieve. Now I've just tried to summarise this very quickly for you. We're really looking at jobs, industrial development, logistics, tourism and land development. And if you were trying to achieve your goals, you'd probably want a modern high throughput port with lots of land around it and deep water access. And that's Kwinana. Secondly, you'd probably want an integrated intermodal hub next to the port. Again, that's in Kwinana. And ideally, a large-scale international quality industrial park integrated with the intermodal hub and the port that allows new industries to develop. And most of that is already actually in Kwinana. That's our main industrial heartland. And also, we'd like to maximise tourism, and that's Fremantle. We already have everything you need there. You see the cruise ships almost every day at the moment. So that's what we should maximise our competitive advantages. So here are some nice photos of what industrial parks look like, and this is potentially what we could see in Kwinana in the future. So these are well-known international industrial parks. And this, I want to put this in here, that's a facility I built and ran for a couple of years and sold, so I'm relatively familiar with what industrial parks can provide. Normally, states and countries want to stimulate rather than stunt business activity around ports areas because they have such a huge economic impact. Nowadays, ports have to be more than mere links between logistics networks. They have to play an important role in industrial development, in developing our community and creating jobs. You've seen this before earlier. So this is potentially what the outer harbour could look like. As you can see, very modern port, and I have to thank Carol Adams and her Mayor Carol Adams and her team down in Kwinana who've done the state's work on this for a couple of years, and an amazing amount of effort. So we've seen what Kwinana can get, the port and the industrial parks. Fremantle, they deserve a world-class terminal. It shouldn't be a logistics island surrounded by a suburbia. So this is what Fremantle could be. This is what we see elsewhere in the world. So it really is a draw card for cruise ships in the future. And you also want population density, you want density of people, you want people to come here regularly, not only tourists but locals. And what they do elsewhere in the world is they put in theatre facilities. This is completely normal when you rejuvenate old port cities. So these are 4 examples in Cardiff and Singapore, Hamburg and Copenhagen. But you could also look at Lisbon, Barcelona, Venice. It's the same thing. You move the old port out into a new facility and you regenerate the area which is where people want to be. So let's think about where the real value of Fremantle Port is, because that's not really discussed a lot. So the real value, as Peter alluded to earlier, is actually in the land. It's not the port land per se. The port land is basically valued at industrial. It's all the land around the port which is of value. That's where you have companies coming through. That's where you can develop new industries and so forth. And you can't do that in Fremantle because we've sold that off over the last 30 years. The only place you can do that is in Kwinana. So Kwinana has... So what this really shows is we have the cost of land at the moment in Kwinana. We have the Australian Marine Complex here, we have the average cost per square metre in Fremantle Port at the moment based upon the current sales price, and we have the land around the Fremantle, outside Fremantle. Now this is really simplified. It doesn't take into consideration what's on the land, how big the land is, where it is. But what we've done is looked at all the sales of industrial land in the last 3 years, and as you can see, times that by the number of hectares available, those numbers are very large of the value that you're creating. Now, why this is important is not that we're looking at 45 billion. It's not that so much. Well, as I said, we've simplified it. What it really is showing is that there is this massive value. It could be here, it could be there, but it's definitely higher than 2 billion. And that 2 billion, that line, is the cost of building the outer harbour. And it's also the sales price of selling the Fremantle Port. So you're really giving, someone is going to get that value. Either we as Western Australian citizens get that value, or it's going to go to external investors. So the economic benefits. Now these numbers, the Indian Ocean Gateway numbers, they come from 25 years of study down in Kwinana. So these are not dreamt up overnight. There's lots of information to back that by well-known companies. And also the Fremantle waterfront development, that's come from Macro Plan. That's from the City of Fremantle's work. So clearly there's a lot of value, a lot of investment that can be brought into not only Fremantle but also Kwinana, which is economic stimulus, which is in our current situation is exactly what the state needs. And as you can see, I took this photo the other week of our country rail line going into Fremantle. This is our main port rail link, which is it could be better, suboptimal. So let's have a look at the types of jobs, because it's not just about numbers and its economic benefits, it's also about social benefits, right? And social benefits is not just about construction jobs. Now these numbers, I've got to say, these are pretty flaky. These come from the Deputy Premier and also the Treasurer, and they're changing every couple of weeks depending on when you ask them. But these are the latest numbers that they've said. So these are construction jobs. There are no permanent jobs when you build a road. They're just picked up in operations and maintenance. These are the real jobs you want. These are the long-term permanent jobs, not only in Fremantle, but also in Kwinana. They're high-paid jobs. These are the ones that you send your kids to school for, that you are happy that they move into these long, high-paying jobs that develop in new industries. Because in a couple of years, the construction jobs are gone and they're the only ones that are left. And not all jobs are the same. So these ones are in traditional Fremantle and Kewdale industries. These are the ones that are at risk of automation in the next couple of years. Whereas the ones in Kwinana that can be created, be that in industrial ceramics, petrochemicals, biotechnology, drones and so forth. These are the ones you want. So we can't get these without developing in Kwinana. You can't really develop the industrial park without the port. It has to be all interlinked. So these are the jobs you want to develop to get the social benefits we need. So then we look at what the net present values are. So this is just a very simple overview. So this is the cost of Perth Freight Link, or Perth Freightless Link, if you want to call it that. This is the cost of the Freight Link with the Swan Crossing. Now these orange bars this is what the benefits are. Now I've got to say that this is the non-monetary benefits, the soft benefits. They're mostly time savings. So if you really look at hard cash, that goes down, it's blue, and that's the heavy vehicle charge. But what this really shows is that the hard cash benefits is what you want. These are your export dollars coming in. This is your investment. They're really in Fremantle waterfront and the outer harbour. As you can see, the outer harbour is a cracker. So that's what you're really after. That's where the value is, and that's what we should concentrate on. So the decision that you're making, and this is what people sort of underestimate when it comes to infrastructure assets is that they are very long-lived. So your decision, you have to live with that for decades. So you spend a lot of time planning and on the contracts and so forth. So the decision you're making in a couple of weeks really considers what we have to live with as a state for the next essentially 100 years. So if the Fremantle divestment goes through, you can see what basically, I think it's pretty hard to argue that these things won't happen. Or you can build the outer harbour and the waterfront, and there's benefits to that as well. We can talk about, we'll talk about funding very quickly, but essentially that there is no issue with and I've spoken to investors and so forth, there's no issue with investors building and paying for the outer harbour and the development of Kwinana. They're quite happy to, if the package makes sense and if they're supported by the government. It's definitely economic. You saw that BGC has been wanting to develop their outer harbour for the last 20 years, so there's no doubt about that there's a good return there. So the government doesn't need to finance it themselves, and this is where we need to change our mindset. In the past, we've had lots and lots of money and we can just do whatever we want, but that sort of changed in the last couple of years, is that we need to think about how we finance any development in the future, and that is you bring in private investors, but you have the government controlling that process. So you don't have to, the government doesn't have to borrow money. They just control that process, but you get all the benefits from around that, all the jobs, all the stamp duty and so forth that goes with it. So that's how you get the economic benefits without having to pay for it. So the solution is, what's in the package to sell? Well, it's a mixture of what's already out there and what we need to move towards. So we're already looking at all the assets from Fremantle, and we're looking at all the agribusiness which we know about moving down to Kwinana, all the Ro-Ro, so all the vehicles, the world's most expensive car park, you're looking at it, that could all be redeveloped. So all vehicles could go down, all dangerous goods. What you may or may not know is we have dangerous goods going through a metro area every day. Depending on how you look at it, it could be anywhere between 15 to 25% of all trucks go through with dangerous goods. It stumps me why we should have dangerous goods in the metro area at all. That should all be in Kwinana, where we have the right facilities, where you have the dangerous areas to look after these materials. And then you also look at a cap and transition for the containers. So not too much. We want to keep, there's no risk. We want to keep Fremantle as a working operating port, but we just want to have an option. Slowly it will change over time. There's no black and white. It will just naturally happen. So the proposed solution is that if you go and look at Fremantle and a Kwinana outer harbour package, then external investors would be quite happy to pay $4 billion as a fair value. Remember, you have to do a development on top of that as well. But that's double what we currently are getting for Fremantle Port. So why would they do that? Because the real value is, again, actually in Kwinana and the land around Kwinana. That's what makes the most sense. That's where the jobs are. So investors will pay for that with the option to develop that out. And that's what would be best for the state, and certainly would help our state debt. And another point could be, similar to Horizon or Western Power, you could do an IPO for it and certainly focus on Western Australian citizens, rather having an option to invest rather than just super funds and selling it out to the eastern states or Canadians or whoever. And in conclusion, yep, no, that's all right. Yeah, no, that's right. I'd like to say that, whether you agree with President Trump or not, he has reminded us that the defence of our society cannot be outsourced and we must take responsibility for our own security. A strong WA is a border for the western half of Australia, and it's clear that we need to forge our own path back to prosperity. A strong, diversified economy is an essential foundation for security. So the current state budget is like roulette at the moment. We are so dependent upon resource royalties, which represents about 15% of our state budget. So it's not sustainable, not even with the debt. So we have to do something different than we have in the past. So this is why Kwinana actually provides that economic stimulus that we need. And just to finish up, I'd like to say that many people in our society are holding us back through a fear of change, but change is now upon us. Let's control that change rather than being changed by the control of others. And with that, I thank you very much for your time, and I hope you think very long and hard about your decision another couple of weeks and what we are going to do for the next 100 years. Thank you.